Friends of the University of Johannesburg, I now present to you the Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, Professor Njabulo Ndebele. Welcome, sir.
Chairman of Council and Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, I have a very serious question to ask as I begin. And the question is also to the audience, that after all the things that have been said, do you really want to listen to me? It is a great honor for me personally to have been invited by election by the University of Johannesburg to be its next Chancellor. I'm tremendously honored by the gesture. And it will be clear from my address, I was not quite sure actually with some definitiveness what is the job of a Chancellor. But the Vice Chancellor, among other things in his introductory remarks, clearly gave me something that looks like a job description. Thank you so much to all of you for being here this evening. It is a very special feeling that I have, and my family. My immediate family is here, and the whole extended family is here as well. And grateful for their support. And in particular, I have to thank the matriarch of the family, my sister, Nomsa Jennifer Namane, who there's not a single event to which she has been invited to support me that she has ever missed. And she's here again on this important occasion. I have written many speeches in my life, but an unexpected hitch occurred as I began to write this particular one. And as I had said earlier, what exactly does a Chancellor say in his or her inauguration? I have been a Vice Chancellor at many different campuses for many years, carrying the vices associated with that particular job. So what do I say, being in a position with a familiar title, but one which does not carry the qualification vice? For sure, the Vice Chancellors often get under the public spotlight, and our own Vice Chancellor will have many stories in that regard, for one thing or another, while their Chancellors often fly innocuously outside the radar screen. What do they actually do and then say in that life off the radar screen? The more I thought of it, I came to one conclusion. Said, why worry about such things? Being used to talking, as my job has got me doing, I must just learn to say very little and enjoy having a title without power. The one official that gives the appearance of being my assistant, called the Vice Chancellor, actually wields all the power. And he's a very powerful assistant for that. So you must be wary of the qualification vice. You might think you're dealing with an assistant only to be knocked down. The boxing study I'm doing is a good lesson in that. So the one official that gives the appearance of being my assistant is actually very powerful. And I'm looking forward to working with my assistant in that regard. So I should just relax and savor this moment, really. Life off the radar screen might involve not having to say a great deal. But what I have written has now changed given the job description. Unless we invoke one of our national habits since 1994, reviewing something under the inspiring but confusing term, transformation. Since we took on this word, we have been sweeping clean. Street names, airports, buildings, stadiums, schools, and universities. If you do not know who were the characters after whom many streets were named since Jan van Riebeeck hit these shores, you soon realize you don't know many who were the characters of the new names also. Even pupils became learners, and good old teachers became educators. So something tells me that perhaps there is a moment for letting some things be and contemplating why they became the way they did. It might be necessary to do this when you begin to experience constant change as an unending process of disorientation, of values replaced by new ones that remain undefined and have the ring of change without a substantive experience of change. It was at this point of this realization that I thought perhaps chancellors perform one of the most special tasks in the world. It is a task to be rather than a task to do. It is to exert presence rather than apply particular skills. Chancellors do not always have to prepare speeches, perhaps except at their inauguration. They do not have to pore through a board pack preparing for a meeting. This is because perhaps their entire life has been a preparation. It is a preparation to exert the power of presence. The secret seems to be in the pageantry of spectacular pomp and ceremony. It involves dramatic entrances such as you saw just now, and exits that you will see very soon. Imposing robes and magnificent costumes that invoke the history and virtues of teaching and learning and their centrality in constantly reconfiguring the very DNA of human society throughout history. And that DNA has experience, feedback, reflection, and experience once more in a cycle of progress. All this history is invoked miraculously each time a chancellor performs a capping in a pageantry of great dignity, recognizing success through a ritual that marks the culmination of a rigorous academic process and conferring honor or rank for an achievement attained after a great deal of effort. Everyone has worked extremely hard, and along comes the chancellor to say how wonderful it has been. There is no salary for this task, but everybody strives to make you feel comfortable. Strangely, this lack of financial reward affirms a value, a very important one, that has somehow lost a place of honor in our country. To experience the greatest joy from affirming the happiness of others who have deserved the experience of achievement. No quantity of money can be an adequate measure of that experience. I guess that is why the Chancellor has no power of command. Rather, without power, not only will you have no vices attached to the performance of your role, you are in a most treasured space to exercise presence and authority without having to instruct or command anyone to do anything except kneel before you for a capping. So I unwittingly found myself meditating about power and authority, considering that a chancellor may have little power, yet be able to exert some authority. I came to the conclusion that it is possible to have a great deal of power and yet have little or no authority. The recent death of the technology genius, Steve Jobs, got the world reflecting on the sources of his global influence. So much was said about him and how he created one of the most profitable companies in the world, and in the process made himself one of the richest people around. I think, however, that whatever financial wealth came his way meant less to Steve Jobs than the deepest satisfaction of having made products that have helped millions of people around the world to navigate with some relative ease through an incredibly complex world. No quantity of money can be an adequate measure of that experience and the satisfactions it yields. Satisfactions of that kind are immeasurable. So, if God could be the ultimate chancellor, he kept Steve Jobs for the genius of his imagination. That is why the success of some of the greatest countries in the world can ultimately not be measured by the quantum of their gross domestic product, although you can do that too, but more significantly, by how much they created conditions for the maximum growth and development of the minds, the spirit, and imaginations of their children. Their children in those countries will never have been exposed to the nightmare of books being shredded in a graveyard of knowledge. It is the unpleasantness and obscenity of this scene that ultimately deprives those with power over it of authority. Authority has a social base, power a formal one. The source of both is broad society. Formal power vests in the Constitution, and where the link between social purpose and power disappears, social drift and the loss of authority may result. I guess a chancellor is placed somewhere along the chain in which human talent is accorded recognition. The gesture of a chancellor's hand over an academic achiever's head becomes much more than the movement of a hand. It is an affirmation of mind, spirit, and imagination. The nurturing of mind, spirit, and imagination seems to carry inherent ethical intent. Mind, spirit, and imagination require the most appropriate conditions for them to grow and flourish. They require care, dedication, the highest sense of public duty, and the greatest respect and love for people. The image of books being shredded in a waste dump of paper sticks in the mind, in the spirit, and in the imagination. And it makes you remember and reflect with some anxiety that human beings are capable of reproducing any condition. Depending on the direction in which their mind, spirit, and imagination are orientated, human beings are capable of reproducing any condition. They may reproduce desolation, misery, and bleakness with as much gusto as they can reproduce success, triumph, and prosperity. It all depends on what is valorized and then rewarded somehow. What pays off can be repeated, even if the nature of the payoff is problematic. Nothing can describe the truth of this than the proliferation of corruption. The relationship between effort and payoff can lead either upwards or downwards. That is the measure of the impact of positive feedback, the reward for any action undertaken. Once the starting point and the intended end result have been established, a self-replicating process can then occur. One of the things that struck me about Marikana recently, beyond the protests and the shootings and the hearings, something that stays in the mind, like the shredding of books, are the desolate conditions of human life in the settlements surrounding the mine. Mind, spirit, and imagination will not flourish there. What brought Steve Jobs the greatest joy and satisfaction is impossible to achieve in those conditions. Such conditions may reproduce desolation if we don't do anything about them. Only one dominant narrative of our times can emerge from such conditions. It is the story of making wealth without imagination and human happiness. Then in fact, in that condition, there is no wealth at all, only money. The original meaning of wealth conveyed well-being, prosperity, and a state of social being in which the standard of living is the enabler of human creativity. It is to create and maintain a state of social well-being that a chancellor's role may have evolved. A chancellor must keep capping, and that each act of recognition of achievement urges us closer to a narrative of hope, inspiration, and success, enabling the mind, spirit, and imagination of each South African to grow and flourish in a new cycle that is positive, that we can replay and replace. We need to reproduce success and the state of being that goes with it. And universities are best placed to perform this task every year. Indeed, the satisfactions of the academy have fundamentally little to do with making money as a driving goal, but a great deal to do with the rewards of peer recognition, from the social value created in teaching, learning, and the discovery and preservation of new knowledge. All the pomp and ceremony of tonight is about the academy allowing itself this one moment of splendor to affirm the achievements of mind, spirit, and imagination. The University of Johannesburg is a mega institution, a land of some close to 50,000 full and part-time students who come from all parts of South Africa. So said the Vice Chancellor of UJ, I've just quoted him, at a graduation earlier this year. It includes, he added, 2,500 international students from 52 countries, an enormous achievement. But there is more, he said. Our university, he added, has an outstanding national and international reputation and a high level of public confidence. Last year, UJ was, for the third year running, ranked second only after UCT in the Sunday Times Generation Next University Brand Study among 8 to 20-year-olds. This study also saw UJ recognized for everything that first-rate universities stand for: academic excellence, cultural diversity, global credibility, stature, and freedom. So this particular statement got my attention because it sort of got me figuring out why me, and it seemed that there was something about UCT in there. It is certainly a good feeling to be attractive to and be needed by young people for any university to be in such a position. It represents a tremendous opportunity. It is a strategic moment. It offers the privilege of shaping the mind, spirit, and imagination of South Africa's youth, shaping South Africa's future where it fundamentally matters. Cape Town, the mother city, Johannesburg, the golden city, are high urban centers, high energy in there. And like all such places, they offer stimulations of human interaction. But I think UJ also wanted to do me a favor, which is to remind me that I was a boy from Jozi who was born not far from here in 1948 at 223 John Mohotlo Street, Western Native Township, otherwise popularly known as Prof Ndebele, and I have never known why it was called that name. But on the 15th of August, 1948, when I was only 6 weeks old, I was baptized at Christ the King Church in Sophiatown by the priest in charge, one Father Trevor Huddleston. So in my creative moments, I like to imagine myself in his arms. Maybe in fact, not his arms, but maybe his hands, because his entire hands may have accommodated my body. So there was my body, I imagine, turned upside down, such that my head slanted towards the aspersory. And then the priest pours water down my forehead in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, and my little body involuntarily twitching in a squirm. And that was a long time ago. My family moved to Niger, and I've just seen somebody from Niger sitting here, and his age is not enough for me not to recognize him. My father, we moved when he taught at Madibane High School and got a job as the principal of Nigel Secondary School in Charterstone. But we kept our links with Johannesburg very closely, visiting family and friends, and in particular my grandfather, Walter Mbalegwa Ndebele, and my grandmother, Mam Shongo, who lived at 1144 Mshongo Street. That is why I have vivid memories of going to church on Sundays at Christ the King. In our Immaculate Sunday best, we crossed the tram line in both directions between Western Native Township and Sophiatown. My sister would have been in her white dress, white socks, white shoes, and a strange white hat that flared upwards. And to crown it all, a small white handbag hanging from her wrist, making her look like a vintage Queen Elizabeth. And that was many years ago. My next vivid memory is more recent. In the year 2001, I decided, upon an impulse, to drive to Sophiatown and to find Christ the King Church. This is the place I last saw as a child in the 1950s. What would it look like some 40 years later? I was truly disappointed. Is this all I said when I looked at it? I exclaimed to myself. When I was a child, Christ the King was a huge edifice with massive pillars. But many years later, I stood there looking at now this small church. What happened? Who changed? Was it I or the church? Never would I have imagined that Einstein's theory of relativity that I once struggled with could hit me with such forceful clarity. And so unexpectedly. So does the church become smaller, or as I grew older and away from it? Or did the church remain as it was as I grew older, such that it has always been its size? But then, I do have the reality of two sizes of a church, a big one and a small one. Or one more question, could the size of Christ the King have remained the same had I lived close by and never left? things do not seem to change when you are around them all the time. These questions I asked myself, I found very intriguing. Maybe the answer to all of them is yes. Each one may describe a reality correct from a particular perspective. It does seem as if what is big can be small, and what is small can be big. You always have to describe the perspective from which you view it. And then I got to think, awareness of perspective makes you less inclined to venture a quick opinion. It imposes the responsibility to listen, to weigh, and then decide. It is the way of the mind, the spirit, and imagination. Perhaps perspective offers a principle of engagement in a complex democracy such as ours. If interlocutors in a discussion declare and clarify their perspectives, they create a pool of experiences from which to craft an understanding that results in a new reality for all of them. The emerging reality may become the basis of new relationships and new loyalties. An open society thrives from the interaction of perspectives. If all this makes sense, then we need to recall that in 1994, we committed ourselves to an open society. Openness would be the default position. Then anyone would need to argue why certain spaces in the public life of our country need to be closed off in some defined national interest. But they have to advance an argument and not tell us that things have to be that way. By definition, openness and perspective are antithetical to a security-driven state. A security state creates numerous hiding places with undeclared perspectives. It can declare an anti-corruption position while itself being corrupt. It can call for efficiency while being inefficient. This is because a security state has little self-awareness. It only has appetites. That is why a security state is inherently deceptive. The consuming appetite of a security state is to impose its own single perspective on a people and then to thrive on their silence. A security ultimately strangles mind, spirit, and imagination. A security state is one in which the police, the army, the intelligence services are used as a principal means of securing public control, in which the management of the state increasingly takes on the look of a syndicated operation. Often, the quest for a security state can be from a desire to secure a permanent state of power, in the sense that a current state of affairs, it is desired that it be maintained forever. History shows amply that such intentions are delusionary. Such are the delusions that may occur whenever power disengages itself from the source of its authority and fails to realize that people, the source of power and authority, are fluid, are a generative energy, always evolving and creating new realities. The purpose of government is to understand this chemistry of social change and work with practical discernment to discover opportunities to leverage the growth of the social mind, spirit, and imagination. It is a labor of love, not of control. The government of the future government is of the government of mind, spirit, and imagination. It is a government of openness and perspective, driven by an intelligence that is the ability and capacity to receive and process multiple perspectives, and one that enables the perspectives to self-create within the permissive constraints of the Constitution and the rule of law. This kind of government South Africa eminently deserves. So the life of a chancellor begins without power and only a sense of presence, and the rituals of affirmation available to the office. Each is a term of a few words and a great deal of the according of recognition, affirming each person who has succeeded and extending the circles of achievement and the plenitude of perspective. Ultimately, this is what countries and their universities are about. I look forward to my time as Chancellor at the University of Johannesburg, or working in different ways with the staff and students of this great university. May it capture and be energized by the spirit of Josie, be renewed constantly by the young of our country and their beautiful talents. Each generation reminds us that the growth of mind, spirit, and imagination is as continuous as the life of a nation. South Africa is one such nation destined to thrive from openness. May we give birth to cycles of progress and success every day, every week, every month, and every year ahead of us. Thank you very much.